What you're going to witness is the installation of bees into a top bar hive. Now these bees are coming from a package, meaning it's about 3 pounds of bees kept inside a small box. That's the box right there on top of the top bar hive. And in the center of this little box, it's covered with mesh on either side or a screen on either side, there is a can. That can is filled with feed. You notice that I just put a little thin book next to the can. So I'm going to use that to cover up the open hole once I pry the can out. I'm prying the can out with my Hive tool. You could also use a butter knife, but why not just use your Hive tool? And the Hive tool that I'm using is specifically the kind of Hive tool people use in Langstroth hives, but you could also use a Hive tool specific to Warre or top bar hives. This part of installing a package can be applied to Warre hives or Langstroth hives or any other style of hive. There's the can, and I'm giving it a little shake just to shake some of the bees that are attached to the bottom of the can that are clustering on the bottom off. And then I'm quickly sliding and gently sliding the book over so that bees aren't flying out. A couple will fly out, that's fine, but I just don't want too many to come out at this moment. Okay, I've set the can aside, making sure that I set it upside down so that feed doesn't dribble out the bottom, and I also don't squish any bees that might still be on the top of the can. Now I'm going to gently go into the hive and pull out the queen, who's going to be in a smaller little mesh cage hanging off the top of the hive. So there, I've got the tab for that. I'm going to bring it up closer so you can see, but she's covered in bees who are attending to her. And there's just a little metal clip usually that you can pull up and slide out of the open hole once the feed can is out to be able to get to her. I'm going to just check the bees are tending her. They're curious about her. There she is. You can see that she's in there. She's moving around. She looks good. I'm going to brush off the bees so that I can get her out. You can see right there this little cork. That's how they would get into her, but I'm going to remove the cork. I'm going to get a much better view of what she's doing. Just go like this. And wait till she's turned away from the entrance and I cover it up. Alright, so from here we are going to install the bees or pour the bees into the hive. Most of the time, beekeepers are going to recommend that you put the queen or leave the queen in her cage and slow release her. So they'll give you a little candy fondant to put in that hole where the cork was, and the bees will chew through that to get into the hive. I'm going to direct release her. I'll talk about that in a second. Right now what you see me doing is giving a nice firm pat on the ground with the box of bees so that they release from their cluster, release from hanging off the top, and then I can just literally pour them in. Gently, a little bit of shaking just to get the bees to pour into the hive. Of course, some will fly, but a lot of them are just going to stay on the ground and start to find their way up the walls of the hive. They're going to crawl up the sides of the hive until they find somewhere to cluster from. They want to hang off the hive. Now there's the queen. Instead of hanging her off, I'm going to direct release her because chances are the bees are going to accept her. They've already accepted her. If they had been really frantically trying to get at her, clustering around her really intensely in a more aggressive behavior, I would assume that they hadn't yet accepted her. It takes some time to get to know what it looks like when the bees have accepted this queen from a package. So for you, if you're a newbie, I wouldn't recommend directly releasing her into the cluster like I did, which means I just opened it up and let her walk in. If you're a newbie, what I would recommend instead is to hang her off the second or third bar, and the bees will cluster around her. Unfortunately, what that does mean is that within 2 days, you're going to need to go back in and get that cage that she had been in out of the hive, which can be a little bit intimidating. Nonetheless, I do find that it's a little bit more of a safe call to hang her off a little string if you're doing top bar or ware installation than to do a direct release. That being said, I recommend looking at what Michael Bush has to say about direct releasing the queen. Honestly, most of the time the bees are going to accept her. Every once in a while they don't, and they'll do something called balling her, where they're going to surround her and move very quickly, shake their bodies, generate a lot of heat, and kill her through basically overheating her. But you would see that behavior with the queen already, even if she's in the cage or when she's in the cage. So usually it's all okay and you can direct release her. It's your call. I just want you to do what feels most comfortable. You can see I'm shaking the queen cage right there. That's just because some other bees had crawled inside to check her out because they could check out the scent that was there from when she was inside. And then I just take it away so it doesn't confuse them because we want them to go into the hive. You'll also see that they're clustered at the front here. Lots of bees pouring out the entrance. That's normal. They're going to slowly find their way back in. All these bees flying around are basically looking for home, checking out the area, and they're going to be drawn by the scent that the bees inside or at the entrance to the hive are making by fanning their wings. That's the scent that's produced when they release the Nasonov gland. It's a scent that signals home. It smells a little bit like lemongrass. And then I've got some more bees still in the cage, so I'm going to give it another firm pat on the ground and then shake a few more bees down right onto the top bars. These top bars aren't closed completely. There's a few little spaces for bees to crawl down and into, and I'll leave it that way till most of the bees are in the hive. So I'm not going to close up completely until most of the bees are in the hive. And this is closing up ever so gently, creating fewer and fewer spaces in between the top bars, moving slowly so that I don't squish any bees as I make the top bars flush with one another, but still leaving space along the top for the bees to go into. You notice at this point that most of the bees at the entrance have gone inside. So they've received the signal, they've gone inside, and by now bees are fully clustering on the top of the hive, so on the roof or the ceiling of the hive, which is the bottom of the top bars. This part is slow going. You don't want to rush this unless it's raining. In fact, if it is raining, I would just recommend putting up some kind of umbrella or having someone else stand outside with an umbrella over you and putting the bees in anyway in the rain unless it's a real big downpour. You don't want bees to sit around in packages. Go ahead and install them. They'll get into the hive. Just cover your work area with the bees and continue on. But if it's a nice sunny day like this, you're going to want to move really slow as you get those frames in or put those top bars next to each other to close up the entrance, moving slow so that you don't squish any bees. You can also use other tools such as grass or your hive tool, or you can use a feather, you can use a bee brush, but just the back end of it to slowly herd the bees towards one of the entrances that you've left open between the bars. And eventually there will be no more bees on top. Here you just see me collecting some bees off the top and introducing them to the front of the hive so we can move the process along. This isn't necessary, but I knew that it was getting colder and I just wanted them to get inside. This is a view from the top down. This is more towards the beginning of the installation, so there's a larger amount of space for the bees to get into the hive. Notice that the front of it is very flush, but then I've got these open spaces between the bars. So the bees are going to go down and in, and as that lessens and there are fewer bees, I'll be able to close up these spaces, make them smaller, until there's really just one space left for the bees to go into. Here again is the entrance at the beginning. You can see all the bees clustered on top, sort of finding their way, and then down at the entrance. And finally, this is a slow motion view of what it looks like when bees are fanning their wings to signal home to the other bees. So when their abdomens are sticking straight up, it opens up this gland at the very, very end of their abdomen, near their stinger, on the top side of their abdomen. And that is the Nasanov gland releasing the pheromone signaling home.